welcome to part 2 of how to play Prime Minister, and in this video we're going to talk about bills, which is one of the really key engines of gameplay, one of the primary ways that you get the victory points that you need to win the game. And throughout this video we're going to be talking about the process of this as it relates to the 4-player game. It differs slightly for 1, 2, and 3-player games, and all of that is covered in the rules, but for simplicity in this video we're going to limit ourselves to talking about how this all works in a 4-player game. And we've set out 3 bills here as an example to get us started. We've got the Mines and Collieries Act and the Telegraph Act, and both of these bills come from the cross-party bill deck. Then we've also got the Government of Ireland Act, and this one actually comes from the Liberal bills deck. So in this example, the Liberals are the party in power, and they've placed one bill here that came from their party deck. Now, we'll discuss how bills end up getting placed here and a little bit about how you should think about which bills to place here, but all of that will make a lot more sense after we go through the process of resolving bills. So the first thing to understand is the initial vote projection when the bill gets placed. And to do that, we're going to take a look at this area of the bill, which will tell us how to think about that. So if we look at the Mines and Collieries Act, it has an A and a -10. Now what the A means is that this bill will be getting support from all members of Parliament. At least all members of Parliament in the party that's in power, I should say. The Telegraph Act, by contrast, has an M and a +20, and the M means that it is only going to be supported by the moderates from the party that's currently in power. And finally, the Government of Ireland Act, which has a P, and if you remember our discussion of the balance between moderates and partisans in your party, this bill is only going to be supported by the partisans. So if we come back to the government MP tracker over here, this is, we talked about this earlier, but this is where this all becomes important. So the first bill, which was supported by all, has the support of 330 members of Parliament, because that's how many members of Parliament are in the party in power. And you can see down here that you need 330 votes to pass a bill. The moderates, the bill that is supported by the moderates, only starts with the support of 270 members of Parliament, because that's how many members of Parliament are moderates, and the bill that is supported by partisan only starts with 60 members of Parliament supporting it, because that's how many are partisans. So if we come back over here, the Mines and Collieries Act, supported by all members of Parliament, but then we apply this -10 adjustment. So we place this marker on the -10 space. And what that means mechanically in the game is that this bill currently has support from 320 members of Parliament. Its projected vote total when it gets placed is 320 votes. The Telegraph Act, supported by the moderates, but with a +20, you can see we've got the marker on the +20 space there, that is supported by 270 moderates, +20, so it starts with initial vote projection of 290 votes. And the Government of Ireland Act, which is supported by the partisans and has no modifier, starts with an initial vote projection of just 60 votes, the 60 partisans in the party. Now, as an aside, all of the bills in the game are based on legislation that was introduced or passed or introduced historically, and this is a bill that was introduced that would have established Irish Home Rule, but it wasn't passed historically. And it comes from the party deck, which makes it typically more challenging and harder to pass. And in this case, you can see why, right? Because only the partisans support it, and it starts with an initial vote projection of only 60 votes, and you need 330 votes to actually pass it. Now, you can take actions which add support and shift the balance of moderates and partisans during a turn, and we'll talk about all that in a second, but there wouldn't be time enough to get this bill from 60 to 330 support before it has to be resolved. And as PM, you generally speaking want to avoid bills that are impossible to pass. So We're using this as an example, but when you're playing the game, this would probably be a really bad idea. So I wouldn't suggest this as a strategy suggestion. So now let's talk about the actions that players can take in order to influence the vote projections for bills. And so all of this is done during the action phase, which we'll discuss in a lot more detail later. But during that phase, players spend an action cube and take an action. And I mention that now because there's two actions that you'll take typically during that phase which influence vote projections. The first one is this debate capability, and you can see both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader are able to take it. There's a level 1 effect and a level 2 effect, and we'll talk about what that means when we do a video about actions. But it allows you to move the projected vote up or down by a certain amount. So if we think about the Prime Minister, if the Prime Minister is taking this action, he has a level 1 debate effect. So that allows him to move the projected vote total up or down by plus or minus 10. Now, being that he is in the government and presumably he proposed this bill, that would allow him to move the projected vote total from plus 20 to plus 30. And if you remember, we started with 270 moderates plus, now we're at plus 30. So now we're up to a projected vote total of 300 for this bill. Now, if the opposition leader was taking this action, presumably they might want to sort of prevent passage of the bill, so they would move it down 1. But for purposes of this example, we're going to move it up by 1. So the second action is the influence action, and you can see there's a difference between the Prime Minister and the opposition leader's ability to use this action. But this allows you to shift the balance between partisans and moderates inside the party that is currently in control of government. So our Prime Minister has an influence here of 2, so he's able to use the level 2 effect and basically shift that by 20. So if we come over here, what that would mean is that he would be able to move the number of moderates up by 20 and the number of partisans down by 20. And it's important to note that whenever you're doing influence, you're always moving and changing the balance, not the total number of MPs. So you're going to move both the moderates and the partisans, but your total, 290 plus 40, should still equal the total of all members of Parliament. But if you think about where we are now, we have 290 moderates as a starting point, and over here we've got plus 30, so we're currently at a projected vote total of 320, so we're creeping closer. Now it's worth noting, and you've probably already spotted this, that moving this has also actually made it less likely that we're going to be able to pass this bill. But if you think about it, influence can be especially useful if you have multiple bills at the same time, either requiring moderates or partisans, because taking this action can influence the ability to pass or not pass, if you're in the opposition, multiple bills at the same time. The other thing to mention that you can do to influence vote projections is use supporter cards. And again, we'll talk more about supporter cards in detail later, but suffice it to say for now that during the action phase, you can play supporter cards. It doesn't take an action to do it, you just play it. And there are some supporter cards which mimic the effect of the debate action. So Lord George Bentinck here allows you to shift plus or minus 10, and the Earl of Malmesbury allows you to shift the balance between moderates and partisans. So if you played this card, you could increase the vote total by plus 10. If you played this card, you could shift the balance 20 between the two, between the moderates and partisans. So let's say we had played that Lord George Bentinck card. That would allow us to increase the projected total to the plus 40 space, moving it up by 10. So now we have 290 moderates, plus 40, so our projected vote total is 330, which is right on the edge of being able to pass that bill. 330 is the exact amount you need to be able to pass a bill. So now let's talk about resolving bills. Every round, the PM must try to resolve exactly one bill. This is not optional. You have to do it. You have to resolve one bill and only one bill. Now, one of the player aids has an entire side that is devoted to resolving bills. So this is going to be really handy when it comes time to resolve a bill. So let's talk about the various things that you can do when you have to resolve a bill. So the first option is that you can attempt to pass a bill by agreement. And what this means, and when you do this, the PM asks the opposition leader if they will support a bill, and the opposition leader says either yes or no. If they say yes, the bill will be passed and you'll resolve the bill's effects, and we're going to discuss bill effects a little bit later in this video. But in addition to whatever effects the bill has, the opposition gets 5 victory points for having agreed to pass a bill in this manner. The second option is to put the bill to a vote. And to do this, you need at least 320 projected votes to even make an attempt, because the bill has to have some chance of passing in order to try to resolve it in this manner. And the reason that 320 votes is the threshold for that is because we're going to draw an uncertainty card, which is going to change the projected vote totals. It's going to introduce a little bit of variability in the outcome. And if you are below 320, then the range of uncertainty cards wouldn't allow passage of the bill. Similarly, if you've got more than 350 or more projected votes, then it passes automatically without drawing an uncertainty card, because again, the range of possibility on the uncertainty cards doesn't allow the bill to potentially fail. And very handily, you can see that they have included the odds of success depending on the vote total, so you have a sense of what's waiting for you in that uncertainty deck. So if we continue with our example, we've got a bill with a projected vote total of 330 votes. We're going to draw an uncertainty card. And in this case, it says that we add plus 10 to the projected vote total. So in this case, the bill would get 340 votes and the bill would pass. Now, by contrast, if we had drawn this uncertainty card, which would have subtracted a vote, that would mean that the bill only got 329 votes, which is not enough to pass it. And in that case, the bill would fail. So let's talk now about what happens when a bill fails. So if the bill fails, you immediately remove the bill and discard it, put it in the discard pile, and the PM, the Prime Minister, is going to lose 2 standing, the opposition leader is going to gain 2 standing, and gain 3 victory points. Now, it's worth noting that a swing of 4 standing between the Prime Minister and the opposition leader is usually enough for the Prime Minister to lose control of government. The opposition leader will get a chance to challenge them and become PM themselves. So you have to really consider whether a close vote is worth it, or whether it's better to take the third option and withdraw a bill. So if you have a bill that you do not believe is going to be able to pass, you can also choose, when resolving a bill, to withdraw it. That is always an option. So if you have like one bill and you have no chance of passing it, you may need to take this action. So when you take this action, you remove the bill from the board and put it in the discard pile. You don't resolve any effects on the bill. That's the same when it fails as well. You don't resolve any effects on the bill. And the Prime Minister loses 1 standing, and the opposition leader gains 1 standing and 2 VPs. Now, it still could be enough for the opposition leader to end up with more standing than the VP, so while it does weaken the government and the Prime Minister, it doesn't do that as much as a bill failing. So now let's talk about what happens if a bill is passed and you sort of implement the effects of the bill. So for that, we're going to look at 2 areas of the card. The first is this area right here, and the second is the bottom of the card. So in this top area, it will show a number of victory points, and it will show rosettes to indicate who gets those victory points. So you can see for cross-party bills, both parties are going to get the victory points. We talked earlier about this, but cross-party bills is not how you get ahead on the victory point track. So in this case, both the opposition party and the party in control of government, or both the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, would both get the victory points on the card. If you were to pass this party bill, by contrast, only the Liberal Party would get the victory points, and they would get 7 victory points. So for a second here, let's return to the option to resolve a bill by agreement. So what you can see here is that if the Prime Minister was attempting to resolve this bill, the Government of Ireland Act, by agreement, it's unlikely that the opposition leader would say yes, because the opposition leader would get 5 victory points, but the Prime Minister would get 7 victory points, or the Prime Minister's party would get 7 victory points, and the opposition leader's party would get 5 victory points. That's not a very good deal for them. But if you look at either of these cross-party bills, the Prime Minister's party would get 3 victory points, and the opposition party would get 8 victory points, because they would get the victory points on the card, plus they would get the 5 that they get for agreeing to pass a bill by agreement. So now let's talk about the second part of what happens if you pass a bill, which is what's going on in the bottom here. And as a quick aside, there's an entire part of the player aid which is devoted to the iconography in the game. So everything I'm about to tell you here is really well covered on this player aid right here. So you can always refer to this during gameplay. So let's look at the examples that we have on the board here. So in this case, what this tells me is that the popular support for the party that passed the bill, in this case it's the party that passed the bill because there's no rosette there, the popular support for the party that passed the bill will go up by 1, and that's because there's only 1 arrow there. It will go up by 1 with the farmers, that's the F, the gentry, the G, and the middle class, the M. If we were to have passed this bill, popular support for the Conservative Party, despite the fact that the Liberal Party passed this bill, popular support for the Conservative Party would go up by 1 with Conservatives and the gentry. Popular support for the Liberal Party would go down by 2. You can see there's 2 arrows there. It would go down by 2 with the gentry, but it would go up by 2 with Ireland. So in addition to shifts in the popular support among the various sectors of the electorate, there can be other effects as well. So for example, in this case, the Prime Minister would draw a supporter card and put it into their hand, which they could then use on a subsequent turn. If we had passed the Parliamentary Papers Act, the Prime Minister would gain 1 standing. And if we had passed the Government of India Act, the Prime Minister would gain 1 favor with Queen Victoria. So the discussion of what happens when a bill gets passed leads us back to how these bills ended up on the board in the first place, and probably deeper than that, why these bills end up on the board in the first place. Or, to put it another way, why you would choose certain bills to place on the board when you're the Prime Minister. So let's first start with how these bills end up on the board. If at any time at the start of a game round there are no bills on the board, that's when you have to go through a bill selection process to put 3 more bills on the board. Now, one thing to note, which you probably can already spot, it means that every single bill that gets placed on the board is eventually going to have to be resolved. So when we think back to that discussion of not putting bills on the board if they're going to fail, it's not like you can stash a bill here and keep it here indefinitely. You basically, at best case scenario, you have 3 rounds to try to pass a bill. So when you enter that bill selection process, the government backbencher and both opposition players will draw 2 bills, and they can either draw them from the cross-party bill deck, or they can draw them from the bill deck for the party that's in power. They draw 2 bills, and then they're going to propose one of those bills. So they'll reveal that all of the bills that they're proposing to the Prime Minister simultaneously. The one that they don't use, they keep hidden for now. The Prime Minister then draws 3 more bills, and again, coming either from the cross-party deck or the deck of the party that's currently in control of government, which then gives them 6 bills total to consider. So you've got the 3 that were proposed by the other players, and you've got the 3 that the Prime Minister drew themselves. From those 6, the Prime Minister is going to select 3 bills and place those 3 bills on the board. And this is an opportunity for a lot of player interaction to discuss with the other players their thoughts, how likely the bill is to pass, whether the opposition leader might consider, passing a bill by agreement. But this is an opportunity for the players to all work together to decide which bills go on the board. Ultimately, it's the Prime Minister's choice, but it's a moment of a lot of player interaction. Now note, if the Prime Minister actually places one of the bills that another player chose, that player's party gains 1 victory point as a bonus. So let's end this video on bills with a discussion of, you know, what's in the decks and how to think about what bills you want to choose to attempt to resolve during the game rounds, or what bills you want to select. So the party decks are a mix of bills which either have require partisan support, which we've already seen, or they are supported by all members of their party. And in the case of bills from the party deck, as we discussed, the majority of the VPs, or the VPs, will go to that party. The bills in the cross-party deck, by contrast, are a mix of bills that have the A symbol, or they're supported by all of the members of that party, or they have the moderate symbol, so they're only supported by the moderates. So the first thing to think about is, depending on the balance between moderates and partisans, you know, you want to think about whether you're drawing bills to consider from the cross-party bill deck or from the party bill deck. So early in the game, you're probably going to see a lot of bills chosen from the cross-party bill deck, because those are going to have a higher chance of passing. Now that moves the game towards conclusion, but no one really gets ahead. Later in the game, after you've had a chance to adjust the mix of moderates and partisans inside of your party, you can start drawing more from the party decks to sort of get yourself ahead. Now, it's also worth noting that bills that are harder to pass, so the bills with tougher initial vote projection totals, are usually more valuable. And so what that means is that bills that are supported by partisan or moderates are usually more valuable than a bill that's supported by all of the MPs. But bills that are really easy to pass can be useful when you don't have a large advantage in members of parliament. You're kind of at that 330 mark, or even if you are heading a minority government, and when you're really just aiming to avoid the penalties for withdrawing bills. So all of that is what you have to think about when you decide. First of all, you have to decide which decks to draw from, because there's an element of chance in terms of what bills are going to be that could potentially be placed on the board. But then ultimately, you have to think about all of that when you decide which 3 bills to actually place on the board. So hopefully now you have a really good understanding of the bills, their role in the game, how to think about them, how to pass them, or how to resolve them, I should say. And that will get you down the path of learning how to play Prime Minister. So if you enjoyed this video, do all the things: support, like, share, comment, and we'll be back with another video covering another aspect of this game in the next video.